Welcome to day 5 of our daily Bible devotions. This is the last that we're going to talk about teleological argument by reading through the passages in the book of Norman Geisler and Frank Turek. So this passage talks about divine design and discusses the anthropic principles and anthropic constants. There are more than 100 very narrowly defined constants that strongly point to an intelligent designer. Number 6. If the thickness of the Earth's crust were greater, too much oxygen would be transferred to the crust to support life. If it were thinner, volcanic and tectonic activity would make life impossible. Number 7. If the rotation of the Earth took longer than 24 hours, temperature differences would be too great between night and day. If the rotation period were shorter, atmospheric wind velocities would be too great. Number 8. The 23-degree tilt of the Earth is just right. If the tilt were altered slightly, surface temperatures would be too extreme on Earth. Number 9. If the atmospheric discharge or lightning, if its rate is greater, there would be too much fire destruction. If it were less, there would be too little nitrogen fixing in the soil. Number 10. If there were more seismic activity, much more life would be lost. If there was less, nutrients on the ocean floors and in the river runoff would not be cycled back to the continents through tectonic uplift. So yes, even earthquakes are necessary to sustain life as we know it. Astrophysicist Hugh Ross has calculated the probability that this and other constants would exist for any planet in the universe by chance. Assuming there are 10 to the 22nd power planets in the universe, one chance in 10 to the 138th power, there are only 10 to the 70th power atoms in the entire universe. In effect, there is zero chance that any planet in the universe would have the life-supporting conditions we have, unless there is an intelligent designer behind it all. Nearly 2,000 years ago, Paul wrote near the beginning of his letter to the Romans, "For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, His eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that men are without excuse." The evidence for a designer certainly is clear in creation, but we often take it for granted. In our fast-paced lives, we rarely stop and observe the world around us, and therefore tend to consider every amazing fact of this beautiful universe as ordinary. But as we have seen, it is anything but ordinary. Now science is showing us, like at no other time in history, that this is a universe of incredible design and complexity. It's giving us a new perspective on a world that we too often take for granted. Astronauts get a new perspective from their spaceships that helps them realize this universe is anything but ordinary. When the first astronauts passed over the surface of the moon and saw the Earth rise, something no human being had ever seen before, they reverently read from the book of Genesis, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." What else would fit the moment? A recitation of the multiple universe theory certainly wouldn't have expressed the awe the astronauts were experiencing. They witnessed design from an angle no one had ever seen before and were overwhelmed with the realization that the amazing creation requires an amazing creator. John Glenn echoed their convictions when, at 77 years old, he looked out of the Space Shuttle Discovery and remarked, "To look out at this kind of creation and not believe in God is to me impossible." The raw impact of their experiences reveals the intuitive nature of the teleological argument. You don't need anyone to tell you that something beautifully designed requires a designer. It's practically self-evident. Nevertheless, let's state the argument formally again, with emphasis on what we've discovered in this chapter. Every design had a designer. As verified by the anthropic principle, we know beyond a reasonable doubt that the universe is designed. Therefore, the universe had a designer, namely God. There's no plausible explanation for the anthropic principle other than a cosmic designer. Atheists must take extreme measures to deny the obvious. When they dream up hypothetical theories that are not supported by any evidence, and in fact are actually impossible, they have left the realm of reason and rationality and entered into the realm of blind faith. Physicist Paul Davies writes, "One may find it easier to believe in an infinite array of universe than in an infinite deity, but such a belief must rest on faith rather than observation." These are the words of a physicist. Believing without observation is exactly what atheists accuse religious people of doing. But ironically, it's the atheists who are pushing a religion of blind faith. Christians have good reasons based on observation, such as the Big Bang and the anthropic principle. This blind faith of the atheist reveals that the rejection of a designer is not a head problem. It's not as if we lack evidence or intellectual justification for a designer. On the contrary, the evidence is impressive. What we have here is a will problem. Some people, despite the evidence, simply don't want to admit there's a designer.